My name is Maria Christova. I work at a company here in Toronto called Promax, and I will be talking tonight about a few DevOps methodologies and strategies that I have used over the last couple of years. So, show of hands, how many of you work in some SaaS sort of business? All right, a bunch. How many of you do something that you can qualify as DevOps, or you have a DevOps element in your company? Okay, a bunch. So I will mention some concepts that are known to DevOps, and then some of them, if you have any questions, if you don't know what it is, raise your hand. I'll be happy to answer those questions, because if I don't answer them when you're like, what the hell is this, then half the talk will probably be sort of lost to you. And then one final question. How many of you have not seen the Game of Thrones finale like me and can't wait to get out of here? Okay, quick. Because I haven't seen it, no spoilers, don't tell me anything. So, when I think about DevOps, I really think about this little clip. I'm going to play it for you. It's really my favorite clip. It's called How to Fix a Bug in Production. And that's actually tech debt that he's about to lift. That boulder is going to be tech debt. So there you go. He's done totally the unthinkable thing. He's fixed a bug in production. And now a real miracle is going to happen. Actually, if you haven't seen this, this is really quite awesome. This footage is amazing, because this never happens. You never fix the bug in production by using your tech debt. This just never ever happens. So that was when I think about representation of what DevOps is, this is the clip that I think about. But if we're to talk about a more formal definition of what DevOps is, I pulled one from the Agile Admin, and it's actually a fantastic resource about DevOps, and it says, DevOps is the practice of operations and development engineers participating together in the entire service lifecycle, from design to the development process to production support. I have, in some organizations, seen the operations and development engineers actually be the same job descriptions, but that makes some people really rage against what I have to say. So if we have to keep these separate, let's keep them separate. But in some organizations, they're one and the same thing. What I like to think about this is that this is the secret sauce of SaaS. This is really what makes a lot of SaaS companies tick, and it's really what makes it possible for us to deliver really quickly on some of our commitments to our customers. It's not this, a never-ending game between devs and ops in which a bug is being sort of bounced back and forth over the wall until someone actually figures out what's going on, and it takes days, sometimes weeks. I have been on so many conference calls where people are just like, I'm not it. This is a problem with ops. Ops looks at it and they're like, the config is fine, so it's not me either. So this is not what DevOps is. DevOps is not a wall that exists between developers and operations people. If you work in an Agile shop, what DevOps means is that you probably have somebody who's DevOps related, who sits on your Agile team, who's there with you the whole time, from the time when you actually start coding a feature until you deliver it to production. A little bit about my DevOps story. About 10 years ago, I used to work at Microsoft in an incubation team, and we were working on a product that had a server component. And as we were marching towards beta, we were told that we have to go and meet with the ops guys so they can actually deploy our stuff into a production environment, into a data center. So we went and we met with them, and they had some really reasonable questions, like what kind of hardware do you want to run this service on, and how do you want to monitor it? And we had no answers, because we never thought about that. And they looked at us as if we were some sort of like savages, and we looked at them like they were aliens. We had no idea what they wanted. They had no idea how we couldn't have considered this initially. Around the same time, my now husband worked at Amazon, and he owned the performance and reliability of the Amazon shopping cart. So they do DevOps, fully integrated DevOps. And so for the longest time while he worked there, I was literally married to the Amazon shopping cart, because we lived in this tiny Seattle apartment. And because he was getting paged all the time, the computer was in the bedroom, and I remember attempting to sleep many nights with lots of Amazon bugs being resolved in the background. And so DevOps is just like foreign languages. You can kind of leave it in the background, and you can learn lots of things. And so since then, I have worked in a number of other companies and startups where we practice DevOps. from like a fully integrated Amazon style DevOps to a place where that practice this very ping pong style of DevOps. So I'm going to talk about 4 areas of DevOps interest, and my talk is separated into sort of a focus on each one of these. If you have any questions, like I said, again, raise your hand on each one of these. I'm going to talk about people. How do you get the right people for DevOps positions, and how do you build a DevOps organization that's sustainable and that's actually DevOps and it works? How do you deal with on-call? On-call is when you have people who carry a pager or who answer pages because your production environment is not working as expected. How do you deal with deployments? That's when you actually take the code that you have dev and put it into a production environment. And I'm going to talk very briefly about tools, because we're engineers and we love tools. So people. You must hire specifically for a DevOps mindset. I know that this is hard, but if you don't go out and hire with a DevOps mindset, you're going to end up with an organization that does a lot of that ping-ponging. What does a DevOps mindset mean? You have to find people who are able and willing to work in crazy stressful situations. If you have tons of customers, if you have a live production environment and something goes down, people can't be freaking out because they're the ones responsible for bringing it back up. So you need someone who has a really, really calm head. You need people who are focused on root causes, not necessarily symptoms. If, for example, part of the product that you provide runs a report, and that report, for example, didn't run for a particular customer, the person that you're looking for is not the person who's going to rerun the report manually. You're looking for the person who's going to go and figure out why that report didn't run automatically in the first place. And I know that this is buzzwords, but you're really looking for somebody who's a team problem solver, because I think that DevOps is really a team sport. This is not an area in which you can have one rock star that's going to carry you forward into the sunset, because no one can be on call 24/7 for months at a time. What you're looking for is broad generalists who can learn, who can adapt to new tools, who can pick up new skills, who can kind of go and figure out what's the best thing that's available out there, because the technology field is changing so quickly. You don't need an uninvolved specialist. I read this in an actual job description. Someone was hiring a C-wizard degree from a brand name compiler school. That's not the guy that you're looking for. Like, that person is going to have a really, really specific skill set that they can only use for the one thing that they know how to do. You're looking for somebody who has a broad set of skills, who can take them and use it to learn new things. You're going to need at least one architect. And this applies to very, very small organizations, and it applies to really large organizations as well. You're going to need somebody who's going to take care of making sure that if you're an agile shop and you're sprinting as fast as you can, someone is actually paying attention to the architecture that you're implementing. Someone actually cares about doing the right thing and putting it in place. And that person is also going to be the person that's going to really help you solve a problem when you're in a pickle. Some small organizations have one architect. Maybe that's all you need. I know that some large organizations will have a team of architects. Some super large organizations will have a team of architects that are unattached to a product, that are basically sort of parachuted in wherever they're needed. Amazon does this. They just have a couple of these people that are sort of amazing, ever-knowing. You just go to them and you're like, please solve my problem because I have done everything, and then I can't figure out what to do next. So this is a really vital job description. This is a really vital person in a working, functioning DevOps organization. And because this is the sort of job market that we're in, you have to be prepared that people are going to leave. You have to, whatever your processes are, must be documented. You must work in a way that when you remove one of your DevOps people from the equation, your organization can still continue to function, because somebody's going to get poached inevitably. It's just, the market is so hot. You've seen this here in Toronto. Next up, I talk about on-call. You must include this into your interview process. On-call is one of the kind of dirty little secrets of supporting the production environment of pretty much every SaaS product that I've worked for. People don't talk about it during the interview process. And then you get hired and people are like, oh yeah, you're going to be on call in a couple months. And then people ask me, like, how do you actually hire? How do you include this in your hiring process? And it's really simple. All you have to do is you have to say these words. You're expected to be within 15 minutes of a computer, or half an hour, or 5 minutes, whatever your SLA is, when you're on call. You will be on call 1 day a week, every other day, whatever the case may be, and every 5th weekend, We get paid on average once in 24 hours. Are you okay with that? Some people will run for the door as soon as you say that. A lot of people won't and will be excited to kind of learn and figure out what it means to be on call. But you have to include this in your hiring process. You can't just expect that you're going to hire somebody good and that they're just going to be super awesome and super happy about being on call. It's not community service. It's literally the most important part of the job because you hopefully have live customers and you have to support them. And when someone gets paged, that's because a customer can't complete an important scenario. And so treat it like that. Treat it with respect. Treat on-call as something that you understand that people are getting paged in the middle of the night. And because of that, it does require compensation. And I talk about this very often. It doesn't matter whether it's cash or vacation days or gift cards or whatever it may be, but you must compensate people for putting that extra effort and being on call. It's also not punishment. If it feels like punishment, if people are getting paged 5, 10 times a night or whatever the case may be, you probably have a lot of tech debt, either scalability, performance, reliability, something that you must pay down sooner rather than later. Because if people are getting paged that often, they're going to leave and they're going to find somewhere else to go and work. A few random thoughts about being on call. Have a predictable open to everyone schedule. Everyone should be able to see how many people are on call and who's on call at the moment. Make sure that everyone is set up with the correct set of permissions, VPN, whatever they need in order to be able to access your production environment and sort of actively debug and fix an issue. I can't count how many times I have been on a call when something has gone wrong and someone has said, I can't access the database because I don't have the right password. Don't do that. Like, make sure that everyone has whatever they need. If you have new people that you're bringing into the team and you're trying to sort of educate them about what being on call is and how to handle that, on call is stressful. There are times, really stressful situations that you have to deal with. Have new people be on call during business hours when there's a full team of people who can support them as they try to resolve issues. And always, always, always have secondary backup. It's possible that it's 3 o'clock in the morning, that you've looked at an issue for an hour or 2 hours or 5 hours, and you simply don't know where else to look. You've run out of all ideas. Have somebody else that they can call that will pick up a secondary page that will hopefully help resolve the issue. Deployments. This is again one of the dirty little secrets of SaaS. We talk about deployments, and this is my major rule. Deploy often, but not too often. Every deployment carries a risk. It's also a lesson, a learning opportunity. It provides an opportunity for you to learn how to sort of run your deployment process better. But you have to find what the sweet spot is between how, too often deployments and then not deploying often enough. You know your business, you know the business that you're in best, you know your customers. It really is about what's the threshold that your customers can handle. As a rule of thumb, I work in sort of like business applications between once every 1 to 3 months seems appropriate. If you have end users that can handle deploying every 2 weeks, deploy every 2 weeks by all means. But understand that with every deployment there's risk, and so you kind of have to manage it appropriately. You have to practice your deployments. Do them often, know what you're doing, understand what your environments look like. Hopefully you have an environment that you can practice deployments to that's not your production environment. But practice. And the one thing to remember is it's not practice that makes perfect, it's perfect practice that makes perfect. If you're doing lots of deployments and you're seeing lots of issues, hopefully you're going back, you're investigating exactly what happened during that deployment and you're trying to work that into the process so that the next deployment that you do is better than the one that you had before. You must have a rollback plan. This is again one of the things that so many people fly by the seat of the pants and then it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're like, I don't even know what to do. It's because you didn't have a rollback plan. Hopefully you've even practiced it once, but know and understand that knowing how to roll your code back and take it out of the production environment and hopefully return it to a place that's healthy and usable by your customers again is a really, really important step that you need to have documented. And speaking of documentation, you should document every step of your deployment process. I know that in Agile shops, documentation has really kind of gone out the window. If there was one place where I recommend that you focus your documentation efforts, it's around your deployment procedures. Somebody's going to be trying to deploy a fix at 3 o'clock in the morning on Thanksgiving weekend, and they're not going to know how to do it. Unless you have a checklist, and then they're going to be like, I'm going to go do A, B, C, and D. So have a checklist, document what you need to do. Tools. Tools are nice. We're all engineers. We love tools, but they're never the answer. Usually, better code is the answer. I like to take a minimalist approach towards tools. Do more with less. Choose fewer tools that you know exactly how to use and use the tools that you have. A new tool always brings with it an extra set of risks. It brings someone has to support this tool, someone has to understand exactly what this tool does. Tools almost always have bugs, you have to deal with that. Do more with less. No tool is ever perfect. Most tools are created because somebody had a specific scenario in mind and then they wrote a tool for that specific scenario. Most tools are mediocre most of the time. And even if you were to find the perfect tool, it's going to be for that one particular scenario. And a lesson that I learned in pastry school, use the right tool right. So if you have a tool that does logging, don't use it for monitoring. It's not going to work. I'm going to provide a couple of personal shout outs to some tools that I really enjoy working with and I have worked in the past. TeamCity for building continuous integration. I'm a big fan of TeamCity. And PagerDuty for incident management. They're actually out of here, out of Toronto. They're a fantastic little company. I love their tool. I'm going to talk about monitoring and logging specifically on the tools front because I think that they're the two of the areas in DevOps where we really spend a lot of our time. If you have a thing that's running in your production environment and you are monitoring it, then you don't care if it dies, which brings the question, why are you running it in the first place? So everything that you run in your production environment, you must monitor. Business level monitoring is a fantastic health predictor. At Amazon, this is the one metric that trumps all is an order drop. People get paged when order drops immediately because Amazon has figured out that at the scale that they have, they can predict their customers' behavior and they know exactly how many orders they are expecting at any given point. And if there is not that number of orders, something has gone wrong with the system, even if there aren't other pages that are going off. Yes, you get some false positives, like during World Cup games or nobody's ordering stuff on Amazon, but it does give you a fantastic business level health predictor of your system. Figure out what your business unit is in whatever business you do and monitor for that. I really like PRDG as a monitoring tool. I've used it for a number of years. It's great. Closely related, logging. If a thing happened in your production environment and you didn't log it, you didn't care that it happened. This is a very close correlation to the one that we talked about monitoring. However, not all log events are created equal. Your logs should be readable and there should be in a place where somebody can open them at 3 o'clock in the morning and actually make heads from tails, even if they haven't slept in a while. So figure out what your thresholds are for logging events, figure out exactly how to prioritize your logging events, but log and log appropriately. We currently use Graylog from X. I'm a big fan of it, so I recommend it. And usually at this point in the talk, someone asks me, okay, if we have a DevOps organization, or if we have a non-DevOps organization, how do you turn it into one? If you have that sort of ping-pong organization I talked about in the beginning, how do you turn it into something that's more closely resembles DevOps? And I will say this, if you're currently doing some of the pieces that I talked about, if you currently have something that resembles DevOps, you can pick up the rest of the pieces and implement them fairly easily. But if you have one of those ping-pong organizations where devs are separated from ops and there's literally a wall between them and everyone plays not it, you have to blow up that organization apart and you have to literally start from scratch. I have found no other way to achieve this. I worked in a large organization that I tried to implement, a slow, continuous, gradual change towards DevOps, and I failed terribly. So, in my personal belief, that you can't do it, you have to start from scratch. We're hiring. We do DevOps. We do all sorts of other dev things. Come and talk to me afterwards, or a couple of my peeps from Firmax that are over there in the corner. We have positions for devs, for DevOps, pretty much across the board. Thank you. Questions if there are any. Yeah.
Have you adopted any Dockerizing in your DevOps process?
Not yet. We have looked into it. It's on the Docker to be to be looked into. I think that I've read about it, it seems like it offers quite a few benefits. Currently for us, it's not something that we really thought that we could take on right now, but I've heard really good things about it. Yeah.
Any of the other like hash code tools like Packer or Terraform, like infrastructure as code, Packers or Docker, any of those kind of tools in your radar as well?
No, Docker's the one that I've really thought about a little bit more seriously, but I'll take the names of the ones that you mentioned and look into them.
What do you think is the role of the developer in the deployment process? Do you believe like it should be led by the development team or by the DevOps people?
So I think that there's a couple ways to approach it, and it really sort of depends on the organization that you currently have. If I were to build an organization from scratch, I would say deployment is owned by dev. And I really prefer to have devs own anything that goes from sort of like having a healthy build and being able to put that into production to doing all the dev work for it. I think that it makes developers more aware of having to support the code they write into a production environment. And I think that it again sort of like provides more people that can help other people if, for example, something's going on in production. If you have an organization which you have DevOps people dedicated to doing that, you're bound to have fewer of them than you have developers. At the end of the day, they're going to use some of the same concepts and some of the same tools as a developer would, just with a different bend. And so I would prefer, if I were to build an organization from scratch, to have development of the deployment process.
So if you only have deployments, let's say every couple of months or so, isn't it too hard for the developers to get into that cycle because they don't do it every day? Like you may have the documentation, but it's hard for them to get into the routine.
Sure, hopefully you're deploying to a QA environment or to a demo environment a whole lot more often than when you deploy to production. That's a fantastic opportunity for developers to practice that. And so I would say use that opportunity for your devs to practice it, even if they're not deploying to production. Surely they're deploying some patches as well between those 3 months cycles as well. Yeah. And hopefully you make it easy enough that it's not that hard for somebody to pick it up. Yeah.
Where do you think the results evolve?
That's a really good question.
What's the question?
Oh, sorry, the repeat the question, sorry. Where do I think that DevOps is going to evolve in the next 3 to 5 years? I think it's going to go closer to dev. I really feel like we're going to see a huge merger between the two. I think that as we get more and more sophisticated tools like Docker, for example, we're going to see deployments get to be easier and easier to a place where I think that they're going to evolve more towards being part of the same organization and the same job description. Personal opinion.
Can we get
Yeah.
a copy of your slides?
Sorry?
Can we get a copy of your slides?
Sure. Yeah. Just come and grab me and I'll give you my card. There's a question in the back.
Yeah, so you mentioned going to deploy through Office, but I thought, like, in my mind, I was thinking the more you deploy, like, the better it is, the smaller the changes will be that you're deploying.
Yeah, so I would say sorry, repeat the question. The question was, how do you figure out what the right balance is between deploying, how often is often enough, I guess is what the question is, because every time when you deploy, you get to learn some stuff and improve the process. Did I get that correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much is, too much?
Yeah, and how much is too much? So I would say that this is more of an art than a science, but you kind of have to figure out how much risk are you willing to take, because every deployment carries risk with it. And then what are you getting out of every deployment? If you're deploying, and then you're finding things in your deployment process that you can fix and improve on, and then that sort of tapers off, then you can probably space out your deployments because you're not learning anything in particular from your deployment process. If that's the reason why you wanted to deploy more often. If it's because you just want to push out more functionality into your production environment faster and your deployment process is totally ironed out, then do it as often as your users are going to be able to handle it. Yeah. Question?
On that same note, you don't sound like a proponent of CIS and CD.
Yeah, I don't sound like a proponent of C. Again, I think that it's a fine line. I think that this is colored by my personal experience because the majority of my experience has been in sort of like business application environment, and business users are not the ones that really like to have their buttons moved. So I would say deploy when you have to, when you have a meaningful piece of functionality that users are going to be able to use. Yeah.
So, the ping pong happening in the development team and the operations team, I guess, was a symptom of the fact that we got the integration contract wrong in those areas of the business, right? So now we ask the ops guys to go through it for them and the dev guys to do it and all this stuff. Do you see the same kind of shift happening between dev and QA?
So the question is, this kind of merger between devs and ops is because there wasn't a clear enough contract between devs and ops, and do I see the same thing happening between dev and QA? I think that happened before the dev and ops changed. I think that the sort of movement towards automation that happened about 10 years ago when everyone suddenly became not a tester but a software engineer in testing, just kind of happened, I think, in the early 2000s, was the initial beginning of that, of bringing dev and QA more closely. Certainly, I think practices like Agile, where it's the team's responsibility, and yet the last couple of days of a sprint, you see devs pick up a lot of the QA work, is also a symptom of that for me. So I think that that's already happened. Yeah. Question? Yeah.
Oh, what's your rollout strategy? Like, it's up, like if the phone goes off at 3 in the morning and it's like 4 o'clock and it hits off the phone, does the person have, you know, the sole authority to say, I'm just going to roll everything back?
No. No. A sole person, I don't think can make a rollback strategy, especially if it affects, like, obviously a huge piece of functionality or something like that. As I mentioned, hopefully you have a secondary backup for when you're on call, and this is the first person that you're going to talk to if you decide to roll back, and you're like, I'm going to do something really drastic here. Like, rolling back is really a last-ditch effort. You're really you've given up. You're rolling back. So hopefully that person is there for you to kind of like bounce a couple of other ideas. Hopefully there's a dev manager that you can call, and you know, I know that I would always pick up the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning if somebody's like, we're gonna roll back. I'll be like, okay, let's talk. Yeah. I think I'm done. Thank you.